Welcome into this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here, alongside High School OT's J. Mike Blake. We just wrapped up the 6th week of the high school football season and the 7th week of fall athletics across North Carolina. The date of recording for this episode is Sunday, September 28th. And there's a lot of news about a topic that we had on one of our first episodes back in July. And let me first say, I don't like beating a dead horse about different topics in high school sports over and over and over again, or just doing it for the clicks or the buzz or the TMZ of it all. But we got to bring transfers back up, and we don't like doing it. And we know that you guys don't like for us to talk about it as much as we do. And as we said multiple episodes ago, if people think that if High School OT talks more about transfers, it's going to cause more people to transfer. But there have been now, as far as we know, there's probably more. As far as we know right now, as we sit here entering week 7, there are 4 football players in North Carolina who are on their second high school football team of the season. And this is not just a North Carolina issue. The latest prominent one being Tyson Broadway, the quarterback at Southern Durham, heading over to Reidsville last Monday. He played on Friday towards the end of the Rams' 44-8 win over Carver. And when we reported that news last Monday, there were a lot of people across the country who said, "Oh wow, it's happening in North Carolina too." This is not a us issue. This is a nationwide issue. But as our colleague Joel Bryant has said, the unique thing about what's happening right now with all of this is it might be the first time that high school athletics are a step ahead of college in terms of how this typically in college, you have something happen and then it quickly trickles down to high school. There are guardrails in college athletics that don't allow you to do what these people are doing in high school. Mm-hmm. And these are things that we could not fathom. So the guardrails are not in place right now. So it is the wild, wild west where you can do all of this. But the guy who is on this episode with me back in July, on a random day in July, out of the blue, said, you know what? If transfers are an issue in the state of North Carolina, here are some options. Here are some things that we can do to fix it. And you know what everybody did? They told him he was stupid and he was wrong and it was dumb. So we hopped on one of these episodes back in July and we talked about it. And what are we doing here on September 28th with multiple kids across North Carolina midway through the season just jumping ship, going to other high schools? 3 of these kids have moved counties to go to other counties, play at other high schools. And J. Mike Blake had a column back in July that said, hey, if this is going to happen, here's some things so that makes it equitable and reasonable.
Yeah.
Jay, the stage is yours. Go ahead.
I'll accept all sorts of apology letters. Just folks, I'm never wrong. I'm just early. And I didn't even talk about in-season transfers.
Because it's never happened.
It just happens. Like, we've never seen it on this scale where we are aware of so many in one year. And no, this is not like Kendra Harrison going to Providence Day and then coming back to Reidsville. This is different. We're talking about public school transfers to another one. And as you mentioned, Evan, one of those is within the same county. How does that happen? Well, again, our transfer rules sound really strict until you realize they're not. If you just make a bona fide move, you're eligible. What I'm saying is that is an old way of thinking. It's also an old way of thinking that if I said, you know what, have some rules on transfers, that I would get a lot of people supporting me. But I know that, like, new school is, oh, you know, he's a hater. He must be against the kids and the families, trying to do what's best for their families. Do what's best for you. All I said in the summer was sit out a few games, because right now you don't really have to sit out anything. Or you actually are supposed to sit out a full year unless you have the paperwork that shows that you actually moved to that district. So clearly people have said, well, hey, I can actually do this in the middle of the year, which you cannot do in college, because college says we're not enrolling new students in the middle of a semester. Like, we're done with that. Wait till the change of semester. High school, they have to kind of take you if you move into the district. It's so much easier to move, guys. It just is. Like, and again, I was in high school 20 something years ago. It was unheard of for families to pick up everything and move to another place and not be around family, not be around where they grew up. But things have changed. Sometimes you're not actually moving. Maybe you don't even have family near you. Maybe your family just got here, a couple of years back. So it's nothing to say, well, this lease ends here. Let's get out of this lease, this townhome, apartment, whatever it is, where maybe we're renting a house and just go over there. So it's happening all over in the middle of the season. And if you're a coach who said, I don't like what you said about transfers. Now what happens if you were to lose a transfer 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the season because you coached the guy a little tough and he said, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go to this other school, take somebody else's playing time.
What a waste of time, too. All the off-season development, the build-up to the year, the hours in the weight room, the making sure the kid's eligible, the checking his grades, the coaching him day in and day out at practice. And then after a couple weeks of putting in that sweat equity and that time with that kid, the kid's just like, yeah, I'm good. And I mean, I know every situation's unique. Every kid that has moved from one school to another halfway through this football season this year, I know they're not all the same. We're not sitting here saying it's a cookie cutter thing. Like no, it's different. Every situation's different. But seriously, like if you're a high school football coach in the state, that's gotta stink.
All right. So here's the thing. Every situation is different. And I recognize that during the summer when I said the only way to even try to tackle something and be fair is to actually have a blanket rule. Usually one size fits all is a terrible prescription for any solution. But in this case, you cannot possibly identify everybody's situation and everybody who is quote unquote legitimate or everyone who's doing it for these different motives. The only thing that makes sense to me was saying by sport, you have to set out a certain number of games before you play. So in football, maybe it's the first 2 or first 3. Basketball, maybe it's the first 5 or 6. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I wasn't doing half the year. And I wasn't doing the full year, which is currently on the books as the actual rule. Now, apparently, everyone discovered at the same time that there's a loophole there's not really a thing if you move in the middle of the season, which I always thought there was. Like, this is unheard of, right? I've covered high school sports for 18 years.
Think about a couple years ago, J. Mike. Paul McNeil over at Richmond goes out and plays at a non-scholastic basketball program in California, comes back to Richmond, and he was required to sit out the amount of games that he played for that school in California,
right,
before he could return to play at Richmond.
And that wasn't even a real school. All right, he had to sit out games for playing for a fake school in California. But if you leave a school in 7A and you go to a school in 4A in a different county, you play right away. That's amazing to me that there's nothing that catches that, and that everyone's kind of discovered that together. Because if you think football, we've got some transfers in the middle of the season. Wait until people figure out basketball, because it's a lot easier to do with the turning of the semester. Oh my goodness. There's going to be some state champion. I don't want to put this as a firm prediction, but let's imagine there's a state champion this year, because we have A classes, boys or girls basketball, where one of those players came on board from another public school in January, and they were already a leading scorer somewhere else. And all of a sudden they show up on the next team's doorstep. Like, that's what we're dealing with.
We cut the numbers down last year of how many teams made it to what was then the Final Four format, and how many of them, had a leading contributor that was from somewhere else the year prior.
Honestly, it was just like, all you had to look at was was there anyone in their starting 5 who transferred in? And it was like everybody who made it to the Final Four, with like a few exceptions. It was like Cherokee girls, Bishop McGinnis girls, which is super ironic. The parochial school was one of those that had no transfers. And it was like almost all of them from just the Final Four, boys and girls. So this year what is it going to look like, and how many of them will have a mid-season transfer? Now, this is something, if I'm the board, I think you have to tackle it right now in North Carolina. You have to try to put in a rule. I know they're scared to do things because the legislature may come barging back in, but I don't think, again, that's why you have a rule that says something in between. Sit out a certain number of games. The independent schools, I got to give credit to Kai Jones, because back in July, when I had this story, he was like, this is a good idea. And that's why he said the independent schools have a 120-day policy if you transfer within the season, because it's always been easy to transfer with independent schools. A lot of them, they do accept transfers in the middle of the year, and you literally do not have to change residency, right? If you were at Wayne Country Day and you want to go to Wayne Christian, well, you don't have to move at all. So 120 days has been the rule. So if the association adopted that, maybe then that would work. New Jersey, a state that I looked into before I wrote what I thought was a pretty good prescription in the summertime. Again, out of the middle of nowhere. I know some people are like, "Oh, you must be talking about us." No, that's why I did it in the summer, so that if I did it right now, you probably think I'm talking about 4 schools or 4 players. But I did it in the summer. So if you did something like what New Jersey does, New Jersey's like, okay, you can play, but not in the playoffs. You're ineligible for the playoffs. You transfer in the middle of the year. By all means, if you moved across the state or whatever, you can do that, but you can't play in the playoffs though. Just to make sure everything's for the right reasons. And like that's another component that now the association has to start looking at and trying to tackle eligibility. I don't know if they're of that mindset, or I don't know if the people on the board are of that mindset, if they've seen how this trend is knocking on their door, but it's going to be there sooner or later. And I'm thinking you have to do some of the things that I've been talking about. Look, I have a history. I know I'm tooting my own horn here and saying like I told you, but I have a way of writing these columns before it actually like comes to a head, before we really see it in full force, right? I wrote about boys volleyball last year. I said this thing is going to be like is here to stay. And now you look at boys volleyball as probably past girls flag football as this next sport up because of how many schools are joining. What I'm just saying for this one is transfers are the thing that is knocking on the door, demanding some sort of action be taken. It's sticky. It's not going to make people happy, but you have to do it because right now the rules have no teeth. It had teeth 10 years ago. It doesn't have teeth now, because if you tell a family like, oh, well, you actually have to move if you want to, move there during the season, or you want to move to this school because you like their coach or want your son to play for the coach, the family will just move. Like that's not a deterrent, and it's not hey, they actually moved. It's not a big thing anymore. So I think you have to take a different approach. A one size fits all. Sit out this many games. If you transfer in the middle of the year, okay, you have to sit out this, or you're only ineligible for this part, or maybe you could play right away, but the playoffs are off limits. Whatever it is, there's a lot on the table. They're going to have to look at it now, because I never thought we'd see what we've seen in the last 2 weeks, which is again, we know of 4, which means how many do we not know of? Mid-season football transfers. And again, football is not the sport that I think of when I think of transfers. It's basketball. So how many more and are we going to see in this winter if there's not a rule that they can zero in on coming this winter?
Yeah, very interesting. Again, if you go on to highschoolot.com, find this story for this week's episode of the Press Box. Go all the way to the bottom. We always put you got anything to add?
The only thing I can think of, though, is like maybe if your school accepts a transfer, maybe the coach has to sit out a few games. Oof. I don't know if the coaches would be for that, though.
I don't think they would.
I don't know. But they're very – sometimes you can be very – there has to be very – you can be very pro-transfer, but it's like, okay, well, instead of him sitting out games, why don't you? Oh.
There's got to be a consequence somewhere for this, right?
It's got to be. So some skin in the game, and just so everyone knows what the deal is. No surprises. And honestly, if you have that, then you can't be mad at any of this stuff, right? Because you're like, well, he transferred. Doesn't matter if it's for football or for, because his family had a job opportunity. Doesn't matter. He's going to sit out this many games. He's going to play right away. He's going to play after that's over. And everything, all is done. Like no more to add. That's where I'd like to get it, where we don't have any more to add. But what are we doing right now? We're saying Tyson Broadway. Oh my gosh, like, is this ring chasing? How does the current Reidsville quarterback feel with another quarterback coming in? Wouldn't it be nice if we just knew ahead of time, like Tyson Broadway transferred, but we know he's going to have to sit out this length of time or whatever, so we can all just not worry about any intention. That's where I want to get it to. But I know in July, people thought I was being mean, but I'm actually trying to help you guys out.
Well, if you do want to go back in time to July 20th, 2025, you can go to the bottom of the story on HighSchoolOT for this week's episode of the Press Box. It's going to say right at the bottom, associated links for this story. You can click on it. It's titled J. Mike Blake, It's Time for a Better Rule About Transfers. So,
Yep.
There we go. Let's keep it to another story that is on HighSchoolOT, and that was one published by Joel Bryant on Friday afternoon about the NCHSAA. And if you go to their website right now, they have declared Monday, November 2nd or 3rd, I believe, as the day for seeding football playoffs. And Joel and I talked about this a little bit on the HighSchoolOT post-game show on Friday night. You can go over and get his thoughts and his opinions on that as well. But what do you think about it, J. Mike? And it felt like, Commissioner Q Tucker gave a statement to HighSchoolOT regarding the issue, and it feels like, reading between the lines of the statement, I think there's probably some wiggle room here to figure out a pathway to at least get it out on maybe Sunday or Saturday. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. When I saw the statement come in, I thought, yeah, they're not married to this. This is very different. If Q Tucker and the staff were saying, like, no, it's going to be Monday, you don't understand, like, here's the context, here's why it has to be Monday, the statement would have read a lot differently. We've seen those statements in the past from the association. That's just like, sorry, we know you feel this way, this is why we're doing it. Instead, it was like, hey, this is the reason why we've had it here, but doesn't mean we're set on it. And the association has been very deliberate as they try to finalize all these championship venues that the dates you see may change in the future. And I think this one, they're going to have to change. I don't think it was a good idea to put it on Monday at all. Just because I don't think there's a few dates. I think baseball and softball playoffs in particular in the past have had it rough because they get their brackets on Monday and then they're hitting the first round on Tuesday. And I think anytime if you can avoid a Monday bracket release, you have to. Like, let me just start from there for all coaches in all sports. I'm a teacher. I'm in school on Monday. I do not want to have my players checking their phones, which they shouldn't have. Depends on the different school rules about it. Like, if you have it up in a phone pocket during the day now or whatever. But I don't want them worried and coming up to me, what's the bracket? What's the bracket? Like, dude, you've got a calculus test. Like, focus on that real quick. I also don't want them, are we in the playoffs or not? And there were teams in the past in those baseball, softball playoffs that thought they were going to have practice that evening and didn't because they missed the playoffs. So you have to put it on a weekend, or you have to put it a few days before. So like volleyball, I think their brackets always come out on Thursday, and then they have the first round on Saturday. That's what you're looking for, that kind of gap, not the immediate of like, here's Monday and now start game planning immediately. Football coaches love to prep.
Remember this was not too long ago. It's probably, I think this ended 2015, 2016-ish. So in the last decade. Remember seeding Saturday used to happen for basketball. Then they would play Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
So you would have that practice. And so it would come out like Saturday night. And then you would have Sunday, and you couldn't participate in practice on Sunday. And so you'd have to just hit the floor on Monday. That changed.
Yep. So that was not a good deal for coaches. Just like, go out, roll the ball out there. Hope you explain to your kids at lunch what they like to do. That is, if I had to guess, they'll probably change it to a Sunday afternoon bracket. I think Saturday, they want to be very cautious about how many people they have dedicated to the brackets and because in the past, from what I've known, they actually have a few people working on the brackets. Now, it's just trying to double check everything and handle the phone calls and the emails that come in of like, our record's wrong, or this is wrong, or how are, all the corrections that do come in. and trying to figure those out. But this year we have a lot of state championships on a single.
32.
Yes, and that's never happened before. In the past, you had like 4 volleyball championships, and sometime and maybe 4 cross country times 2. So that's
And maybe 4 tennis.
and maybe 4 tennis, like 16 max, right? But now you got 32 that are coming in over that weekend. So not only is your staff busy on Saturday, certainly, and having to spread out across these different locations wherever they are, but also they are drained because they've also been doing the state championship thing on Thursday and on Friday night. And if we're back at the Mecklenburg County Sportsplex, then they're getting hotel rooms down there, maybe, and having to do that thing over and over again, and then all day Saturday. So who is left to do the brackets? It's also, there's a lot of turnover. So I know so 2 people who would definitely know how the brackets work. One, Trey Waters, no longer there. One, Brad Alford, no longer there. So it's going to be a new group of people kind of doing the brackets this year. Maybe haven't done it as much in the past. So again, I think if I had to bet, they'll listen to the coaches on this one and say, sure, okay, we will begin the seeding process at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, just to help get some stuff out there. Now, no one has to go meet at a gas station, at a corner store, and exchange tape like the old days, right? There's huddle and things like that. So no one's going to have to make that trip on Sunday night like they used to, and coaches still reminisce about. But that will at least get coaches to know we're in and we have practice and we've got to look at this as a group come on Monday. But can we also be honest here, Evan? Can we also
I have good news. I have good news.
Yeah, tell them.
If you want to know what the playoff brackets are going to be with 99.99999% accuracy, you can be a High School OT insider and get High School OT playoff projections. You can actually get them right now. But if there's one person in the state of North Carolina that is going to have the time that others may not have, it's going to be our own Joel Bryant.
Yep.
And he will be keeping you updated, and you will know more than likely who you're going to be playing the following Friday night. Mind you, also, with some of these new brackets, a lot of teams are going to get first round buys. So you're actually not going to come on now. But for the ones that are going to be playing in the first round, you can find out who you're going to play based on High School OT's playoff projections. And I will add this. If they're wrong, that means somebody didn't do the right thing in max preps. So I'm gonna give you a warning. It's about to be week 7 of the high school football season. If you want them to be accurate come the first weekend of November or last weekend of October, take care of your max preps now. Take care of them every Friday night. And then you know what? If you want to wake up on Saturday morning and you want to see up-to-the-date playoff projections, then the morning after you play every single Friday night, go on max preps after your game on Friday night and enter your score in a timely manner.
Yep. You don't have
Joel wakes up first thing in the morning before the first college football game kicks off. He'll already have playoff projections for you. Isn't that crazy?
In all 8 classes, which is exactly what he's been doing these last Saturdays. I used to do playoff projections for years. I think Joel is even better than I was.
Oh my gosh. If you look at Joel's playoff projections spreadsheets, there are formulas that I didn't even know existed in Excel that he's got lined up where he puts everything in and it just goes, sorts them all out. I don't know how he does it.
I did it so differently. But I would always have like a few mistakes here and there. And I would get to the point where I'm just like, I don't even know how I made that mistake, but the real brackets are out, whatever. Joel was like studying anytime he's had anything wrong and figuring out exactly what that is so he can troubleshoot it for next time. Like and like, I think that shows.
Don't matter now because the big holdup over in the past was Joel would have to go through every single standing for every single sport in the state. And if you would look at his computer screen, it would be like a million little tabs all across the top of every conference in the state of North Carolina. And he was having to break ties and email people about tiebreaker rules. It doesn't matter now. So you can get them quicker than ever.
If Joel is accurate with that way of doing it, like he's definitely going to be right on the money with the new playoff system.
And I'm going to add one more thing before we switch topics here. If you want $15 off of your annual subscription to High School OT Insider, so that means you save $15 for the entire year, starting in the month of October. You got 2 more days. Today, Monday, the 29th. Tomorrow, September 30th. You go to highschoolot.com, sign up for Insider, use the promo code September, you get $15 off of your annual. So again, if push comes to shove, in worst case scenario, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association announces football brackets on Monday, and that is so bad, you can get a sneak peek on Saturday.
That's right.
Like you normally do every year by being a High School OT Insider and getting High School OT playoff projections. Change the topic. Hop off the soapbox. We talked last week about volleyball. We talked about how I was able last weekend to go down to West Henderson, check out their Falcon Bash tournament. It was their first one that they have ever done. They were supposed to do it last year, but Hurricane Helene hit at this time a year ago. Mm-hmm. But we saw this past weekend a lot of tributes, a lot of remembrance of what happened in our state a year ago and how everything was kind of flipped on its head and paused in time. And I kind of just want to look back on it, J. Mike. Look back on kind of what happened to the western part of North Carolina and where we've gotten from now, because I think one of the interesting things that, we didn't know at the time was so many programs and schools and were affected by this. And I think last year, especially in the volleyball state championships, we heard those stories because there were so many teams from the mountains that made it to the title game and won. Talk about Polk County, talk about West Henderson. To name a few, I know, you had Asheville had a really good showing in the cross country championships last year. Brevard had a really good showing in the cross country championships last year. Western North Carolina rebounded athletically in high school sports in the face of adversity really well. And you heard some really touching stories about how they were able to bond together through all of that. But now that we're a year removed, how do you look at how this past year's been for Western North Carolina?
It's a little bit crazy to think that it has been a year, because in one hand, like so much has been happening, right? But on the other hand, you look at those videos of like, here's Chimney Rock 1 year later, and you're like, man, it still doesn't look like Chimney Rock. I went up there. You've made more trips up to Western North Carolina than I have, not just recently, but I think just all in all. So for me, as a native North Carolinian, I've always done more stuff in the eastern half, and I really kind of enjoy covering high school sports in the western, like out towards the mountains, because then I feel more in touch with the entire state that I love so much as a whole. And you just run into so many good people in Western North Carolina and great communities that have so much to offer. So when they were hurting that way, it made your heart go out to them. I remember the Pisgah wrestling coach, when they were making their way to the state championship, talking about how some of his wrestlers lost their homes in Helene. And I know a lot of focus for Pisgah is usually what's going on with the football stadium, because it's right next to the Pigeon River. But he said wrestling was just a relief for those guys, a distraction from the day to day. He's like, when they go into the wrestling mat, that stuff leaves their mind. When they walk out, or they walk out of the mat room and head back home, everything hits them again because they have to go somewhere else that's not home. It will be, I think we'll hear stories about that for still decades from different athletes and coaches who come from there and through there. And I do think it was just, for whatever reason, last year was probably the most impact that Western North Carolina had in the playoffs that I can remember. There's so many teams making it to regional finals or fourth round upsets.
You had Asheville Christian,
individual state champs. Like they were
yeah,
everywhere, and I never
Asheville
remember
Christian
seeing.
volleyball, who is
Yes.
again the top team in our 828 right now, top 10 in the state. Like their school probably got hit harder than any other in the state of North Carolina, and they still qualified last year as a state runner-up.
Yep. And I was at that state championship match, and Davis and Day had little gift baskets to hand each player, which was really nice. I knew it was tough for
That's
them
right.
to
That
accept.
was really nice.
Tough for them to accept when they just lost a state championship that they wanted so bad. But there's just so much resiliency. And it's, I just hope that things continue on the right. McDowell girls basketball, like the thing that they did last year, make it to the Final Four. Like
TC
there's,
Robinson baseball, like every season had a handful of teams from Western North Carolina who just had just memorable years.
yep. And we're still thinking about them. And anytime you go up there, it's hard not to. You still see the reminders. And it'll be a long time until we don't see things that remind us of that. And in some ways, it's going to be more difficult than the East. We know how to rebuild in the East when Eastern towns get hit or flood, and it's so much more difficult to help out and get things back to where they were in the mountains. But I know, I guess my message is just, we're still thinking about them. It's going to be very, I can't wait till we go back to like a Chimney Rock or a Lake Lure and it looks like what we used to. I don't know if you're saying that's not possible, then at least hope that, the new memories or that the scars kind of heal over a little bit from this.
Yeah, and a good point you made, and it's actually funny enough, it was a point I made to you and Joel Bryan over this past weekend. I don't think people in the eastern part of North Carolina understand the passion that the western part of the state has for high school athletics and how drastically different it is compared to the eastern part of the state. And that's not a knock on the eastern part of the state. That's not to say that there isn't incredible high school sports culture in the eastern part of the state. The thing that makes North Carolina kind of magical is each region has its own, fingerprint and DNA to it that makes it special around high school sports.
Yeah.
So that's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to say it's one against the other, but it feels different covering high school sports in the western in the mountains. It
Yeah.
does. It feels different. There's a different level of passion. There's a different level of care. The facilities, the experience, the environment, it's unmatched. It's unique. You're not going to find. I use the term cookie cutter earlier in this episode. Nothing is cookie cutter in Western North Carolina, and they like it like that.
Yeah.
And it's cool and it's special and it means so much to them. So, like you said, it's 1 year removed from Hurricane Helene is not just the instant like up everything's back to normal, we're fixed, we're good. No. I
Yeah.
mean, I was there 2 weekends ago. You drive through, does it look a lot better than it did when I drove through there a few weeks after? 100%. But are they, no pun intended, over the hill yet or over the mountain? No. It's a steep mountain to climb to get over that, and obviously they're a very resilient region of our state, and so I hope for nothing but the best as they continue to roll on there.
Well, it's, I guess for folks in the eastern half, what I've learned about the Western North Carolina is, in Eastern North Carolina, when you have a town like Kinston that gets hit, or let's say there's bad tornadoes in Wilson or something like that, you get a lot of people from other parts of the state that are like, man, that's my hometown. Like, and they want to reach out, help out, and donate, and or another Goldsboro, for instance. Like you're like, oh man, like I'm from Wayne County, blah blah blah. The problem that Eastern North Carolina has had in recent years is they can't get, and I've written about this and gone to high schools and had that story and those columns. They're trying to get people to stay, to move back home, to be the teachers, be part of the community, keep that strong high school tradition going. And sometimes the Eastern schools struggle to keep their traditions going because when their kids go off to NC State or Carolina, they stay in the Triangle, or they go off to UNC Charlotte and they stay in Charlotte. In Western North Carolina, for whatever reason, so many kids come back. They go to Western Carolina and come right back. Go to UNC Asheville, come right back. They kind of nurture this culture and tradition throughout time in a way that is really enviable. And I wish other parts of our state could. I wish we could all do it the way that they do it, right? And like when I went to Pisgah, this is after not Helene, it was the other hurricane. Can't remember his name now, but first home game back, and I was there for it. You know, they have this like old tradition is this, like something cut out of a movie where they stand around in the circle and they kind of do their Pisgah Bears chant, and then they all come collapsing in, and I'm just like, and they sing the alma mater together, and I was like, this is like out of a movie, but really a lot of schools used to have that, but don't anymore because no one's kept it alive. These like the way they bond together during trials and tribulations like the hurricane is the way they bond together every Friday night for football, the way they bond together every time one of their teams is making this trip to Raleigh, and they always bring a busloads and busloads of fans. They have something that's really special and enviable. I wish we all could have it, where people come back, people care, people hand down those traditions. And so I think that makes their pain, that what they're going through, even harder to deal with, because sometimes they can feel alone because they don't have people all the way across the state who are like, oh yeah, I grew up in that county and I've moved to Raleigh. And, they kind of look at themselves like, man, like we're all we got. And as they continue to rebuild, I just hope that the message is that, North Carolina hasn't forgotten, that we do still, care for them. And especially, preserving what makes them so special is keeping that community identity that they have.
Couldn't say it any better myself. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box. We're getting really close to the end of the regular season for sports like girls tennis. We're getting really close to the end of the regular season for sports like volleyball. Those projections, you can see them online if you're a High School OT insider. It's not just specific to football. You can check out those brackets and those playoff projections for every sport that has bracketed state championships. You can find all that on highschoolot.com. It'll be linked to the bottom of the story about this week's episode as well. That's going to do it for this one. For Evan Moesta and J. Mike Blake, we hope you have a very happy week 7 of the high school football season and the 8th week of the fall athletic season here in North Carolina. That has been this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box.